Hello and welcome back. I'm Nicole, a cottage witch, and this is my week in tarot and books and painting this week because that's my version of a midlife crisis, but we'll get into that later. So the only tarot I used this week was the Avatara, and it was just for fun. I was very unserious this week and just playing, with the paints and just, trying to find the joy in life when the world is bananas. So this is great for that. I love this deck for that. This is so much fun and so ridiculous and so colorful and vibrant and just full of life, that I've really enjoyed using that this week. And it just feels beautiful to use. The sensory experience of using it is amazing. And then I got, and it's still slightly airing out from the box, When Olga Speaks, which is just a little guidebook. I have not gone through that yet because I just got this yesterday. And it does have a slight smell, so I'm just airing it out before I use it because I'm particular about that sort of thing. It'll air out eventually, I'm sure. Anyway, this was the first one, and look at that. It's so beautiful. The tariff on this, because I'm in Canada and I think she's American, was absolutely bananas. It was just outrageous. So I won't be doing that again. I know she's got another, I think, Kickstarter coming up, pre-order? I can't remember. Anyway, can't afford that at the moment. Looks very pretty though, but this one I'm very excited to use because I think Olga was her grandmother, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to read through the guidebook on this one. Sometimes I skip the guidebook, but on this one I think I'll read through it, find out more. And anyway, it's beautiful, and I like the keywords as well. So, and the edges are black, and so it's very pretty. So yeah, that arrived and is just off-gassing at the moment. All right, and then bookish things. Okay, so I actually finished books this week, which, hooray, because I've been in a tiny rut for a couple of weeks. I finished My Name is Emilia de Valle by Isabel, which was a lot of fun. It's historical fiction, which is usually what Allende writes. Sometimes magical realism. There's a tiny bit of that at the very end, I guess, depending on how you read it, but mostly it was historical fiction, but it's really good. The main character was fantastic. So I enjoyed that. She was a reporter when women weren't really supposed to be, having jobs at all. Certainly not ones that required them to travel by themselves, well, sort of, to war zones and whatnot. So yeah, that was a good fun adventure sort of book. And then I listened to Life on Svalbard by Cecilia Blomdahl, who I think I first heard about via her YouTube channel, because she lives in one of the northernmost settlements in the world, in Norway. I want to say it's part of Norway. Anyway, it's well north. It's proper north. I mean, I've known people who lived in the Northwest Territories, and this might be even further north than where they live. So it's north. Too cold for me. I like the idea of the dark. A couple, 2 or 3 years ago, I set myself the goal of becoming more okay with the seasons I don't usually get along with. So I started with winter because that was the hardest one, and I actually kind of like it now. I've got the right clothing for it, which is immensely helpful. Do get the right clothing for your climate, because if you can afford the, decent to good quality stuff that's suitable for your climate, it makes a world of difference. And also, I just having a different attitude about the dark days, and then making myself, hot chocolate and lighting candles and all this sort of thing is more fun. And she talks about that as well with the dark. She has a whole ceremony sort of thing where she puts up all the little fairy lights, because they have, I think she said, 3 or 4 months of just dark, just no sunlight whatsoever ever, which is wild. And then they have months of all sun, which would also take some getting used to. And so now I've got, with the last summer, I started trying to get used to the summer more, because I like the spring and the fall. I like the nice, temperate, reasonable, like, body temperature weather. When it gets too hot or too cold, I'm like, I have sensory processing fun. So that's a delight. But I have gotten better at it and found ways to enjoy it, despite the fact that I'm not, like, naturally inclined to some of these seasons. And then I started reading. I'm only maybe halfway through the audiobook for Vilette by Charlotte Brontë, which is so much fun. I love this book. I'm not sure I love it quite as much as Jane Eyre, but I really love it. She's such a good writer. And then I got this brick out. Now, I've had this for a while. I read this about 20 years ago. This is The Brontës by Juliet Barker, because I think Candy of the Great Literary Rabbit Hole either just got it or just started it, and then Rachel from Second Thoughts About the Mission started it this year, I think, or is going to start it this year or something. Anyway, I can't remember which is which, but they both talked about it recently, and I loved it the first time, and it's like 800 and some odd pages. It's a brick. It's very heavy. You don't want to drop it on your face if you're lying down reading. But so far, I've gotten all of that far into it, which is not very far, and it's mostly about Patrick Brontë, their father, at this point, and his, school days at Cambridge. So that's pretty interesting. And then his early days as a curate. I'm not super. I've got to look up all the positions in the English church, because they all have, like, vicar and funny names I'm not familiar with, so I got to look that up. Do a little Wikipediaing. All right, and then I got this book too. This is Drawing Lessons from the Great Masters. So what I didn't want was like a how-to art book, and this isn't really that. It's more like, it's mostly figure drawing, which, okay, I would have preferred like more variety of landscapes and still life and different things. But basically, it's all the masters like Da Vinci and Botticelli and a bunch of others, Rembrandt and so on, and a few I've never heard of before, which speaks not to the fact that they're not famous, but that I just haven't heard of people. But it's got samples of their sketches, and then it's just got some text about that. So it's not telling you how to do it, it's just pointing out things that you might want to observe in like their line work, or how they do the shading, or how they tackle this or that feature in the painting that people might have trouble with. And so it's a really interesting way of looking at art, because it makes you pay more attention to, like, I just look at that and go, well, that's pretty and impossible, which, I mean, it is. I'm never going to be able to draw like Botticelli. That's not the goal. This is not going to happen. But it's really interesting to look at how they do things like light and shadow and line work and things like that. So I've just been flipping through this a little bit, and when something catches my eye, I'll read a little bit about it, and yeah, so that's quite fun. And then I got my loom I've put away now, but I talked last time about how I wanted to make burlap but purple, and I was gonna buy some burlap and then paint it, and then I realized I had a loom and could make it myself, so I did. So here's some purple burlap scrap. This was in between some other scraps, which I'll show you in a minute. This is a bigger piece of purple open weave, which is quite fun. That'll make it into a collage someday. If I can, oh, it's getting all, come on now. Fold out properly, thank you. All right, oh yeah, more scraps, and then I wasn't sure what to do with the rest of this, so it's just tied up in knots at the moment. Well, orderly knots, but you know. And then I had a friend of mine from my previous job had lilies in her backyard, and so I got some leaves from her like 4 years ago or something. Like, it's been a minute, and they were dried, and so then you wet them, and braid them, or basket weave with them, or whatever you want to do. So I had braided loops of these fibers hanging on my wall for about 2 years, 3 years, something like that. And so I wove with them just to see what would happen. And it's kind of interesting. I kind of like it. You can see through it a little bit, not as much as the burlappy sort of texture, but it's still kind of interesting. So I'll do something with that at some point. And then I made myself a mini rug for my entryway. This is with upholstery. It was the same warp for all of these, the same purple warp threads. And then this was leftover upholstery from when I reupholstered my coach, which I am never doing again. Nope. It's also a terrible upholstery fabric, so I don't want to use it for anything else because it's not very good. And the look of it didn't last very long, so I don't mind putting my shoes on that bit of rug. So that was my fun with weaving this week. And then I had fun with painting. So these are just scraps of, what was the book? Jamaican Inn by Du Maurier. I have a really, really old copy of that. That's like not old enough to be like a first edition. It's just like something published in the, I don't know, 60s or 70s, and it looks a bit meh. The paper looks fun though, because it's all kind of yellowed and weird. And I didn't want to keep the book, so I was gonna take it back to a used bookstore. But then I thought I'll make bookmarks out of it because I saw somebody else doing that on the internet, as you do. And then these were like scraps of paint that I had to wipe off of my, oh, now I've got bits of upholstery fiber all over me. That's nice. Little kind of scraps of paint that I had left over on a palette knife after some of these other paintings that I was working on, and just put them on the bookmarks, just, you know, for a bit of fun. So now I have a series of dorky bookmarks. So that's exciting. And then, okay, so this is my midlife crisis. I've gotten back into acrylic paints, which I have not done since my undergrad. And I had to go buy some more because the ones I've had for 20 years were dried out and, like, I mean, half used up and dried out and not usable anymore. So I got some new ones. And I set myself a project of painting the same, inspired by the same photo of a beach, which I've now lost. But it's a beach of a lake in Saskatchewan from the 80s or early 90s, I think 80s. And so I used the same photo as inspiration, limited myself to just purple. So I have 2 blues, 2 reds, and then white. And however I can mix those, I just wanted to play with the different tones and shades and things you can get, and different values and whatnot. And so I started with one, and then I was watching Orla Stevens, I think, who suggested, very sensibly, having more than one painting on the go at once, because then you don't have to wait for things to dry. And the other reason I also like this is because it gives you, or it gives me at least, more license to just try things that I might not ordinarily try if I was feeling too precious about one thing. So this is the one I started with, which is a hot mess. It's pure chaos. This was just experimenting with textures and colors and things. And then this was also with a palette knife, and then this was just with a brush. I think I had 1 palette knife and 1 brush that I could use, I think, is the challenge I set, and just to find out what sorts of marks and things I could make with them. These 2 are my favorite. That's also, is this with the, yeah, this is with the palette knife, and this is with a brush. And I was just playing, and it was fun. And then at the same time as I was doing that, I made these little ones in the leftover space. I've got a couple of boards that I tape things to and paint on. So I put these tiny little ones on there, and then did that thing where between all of them you just sort of draw lines between the different panels to make different shapes, and then you fill in the different shapes with different colors. And it's a fun little exercise. It was a way to use up leftover paint so I wouldn't feel like I was wasting something, and then I could experiment with different color combinations next to each other and things. So that was fun. So those are the finished ones. This is the work in progress. This is one of these boards that I painted on. Whoops. It's a bit warped, but oh well. I'm not a professional. I'm happily amateurish. So it's still slightly drying, so I have to be a little bit careful. I mean, it's dry to the touch, but it's not like cured dried yet. So I started making the first one because I'd seen somebody, oh, I can't remember who now, making, if I can remember, I'll link them down below. But they were making a bunch of watercolor sunsets and made like 20 or 40 of them, or some like ridiculous number of sunsets using the same palette, just experimenting and using things in different ways. And so the bottom one, which I think I actually like better in the end, was this, the top one was the one I intended to make, and then the bottom one was where I was like cleaning off the palette knife and then ended up with an accidental sun here, and kind of liked how the top part looked, so then I made the bottom part look like vaguely something. It's not supposed to be realistic. Oh, and I was very happy that I could get, I wasn't sure I'd be able to get a magenta color with the paints that I've got, because I used the same yellows, reds, and blues and white that I'd used in my undergrad. And because I took a couple of art classes back then, a very long time ago. And I couldn't, with the white, I couldn't get a magenta. It just ended up being sort of a medium to pale pink. But with a gel medium and the red and the world's tiniest bit of white, you can get a pretty solid magenta. It is very cool. So I have a gel medium that it's matte, a matte gel medium that I've been experimenting with, and I may have to get a couple other types of, I may try a satin medium at some point. Because I haven't put enough in, or maybe it's just not quite dry yet. Just looking at it, that I can tell that it's matte. Like when I use it on collage, I can tell that it's matte. And I haven't noticed that yet on these paintings, because the acrylic paint it's not really a gloss, it's more like a satin sort of finish, I feel. And so if I wanted it to match that, because the project after this is going to be experimenting with gel medium, and just a whole project of probably like 3 or 4 other little paintings like these purple ones, where I just play with the gel medium and find out what happens when you do certain things, because I've never used it before. So that's good fun. And then the last project is on this board, which is just boring purple backgrounds at the moment. So they're quite dark, almost black in a couple of them. I've lightened them up a little bit, actually. They were darker than this. But the idea is I'm going to attempt being the key word here, a dandelion with various yellows and oranges, and maybe this new pink that I've found that I can do with a gel medium. So I wanted a purpley blue background for those, and I'll probably add another layer of purpley blue, bluish purple to all of these. That's a hair lighter, because this is maybe a bit dark. But I was trying, again, it was sort of a continuation of this purple experiment. Now that I went sort of bananas with that, I wanted to be a little bit more intentional with this and make, you know, specific purples, which I did. I got the purples I wanted. They're just a bit too dark, so I need to lighten them up a little bit, I think, at least a couple of them. Yeah, so that's been my week in shenanigans. I hope you've had some joyful moments in your week, despite the world being a touch stressful sometimes, or most times. And if you have, let me know, because I'm curious and can always use suggestions. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.